go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll note that we have a quorum present. Flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, 2.0, additions, revisions to the agenda.
I have one.
Okay.
I would like to remove the December 19th meeting minutes from the consent agenda. I'm going to talk about those separately.
Okay. Just move this down to, let's see,
You want them relocated in this meeting, or you want them tabled to another meeting?
We need to talk about them in this meeting, but I don't know if we'll approve them, but we need to discuss them.
okay. Yeah. We'll move that down to 5.1. Okay, public comment. Individuals wishing to address the county court may do so at this time and at other times throughout the meetings. Speakers are asked to raise your hand to be recognized by the chair, give your name and address, and limit comments to 3 minutes. Any public comments? If not, we have 2 bits of correspondence. The first is a letter from Department of Environmental Quality to our planner, Michelle Colby, regarding the 2017 DEQ Material Recovery and Waste Generation Summary, which in shorthand is our recycling levels. And I won't read all of it, but the takeaway of it is our calculated recovery rate is 18.1%. The goal for 2025, I think that's probably a statewide goal, is 25%. So we disposed of 1,738 tons of waste in 2017 and recovered 383 tons of it. So first next one is a letter from Jim Wright in Arlington regarding Waterhall Montague Wind Project, dated December 21st. And I'll just read this one quick because it's pretty short. Having furnished and transported water for several windmill projects, I believe the Commission must reverse its agreement with Kevin Hagwood to furnish construction water for the Montague project. On all projects for which I was responsible for the construction water, on many occasions we exceeded the Shelter Station storage by 3 times, or 250,000 gallons in one shift. If this happens at Shelter Station, the reservoir will empty, all other users will be out of water, and construction will be shut down. The City of Arlington has 3,000 gallon per minute permit from the Columbia River. This seems to make sense for all, as all of our aquifers seem to be depleting as per State Water Master's office. Why use well water when the Columbia River water just rolls by? Okay, move into consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
You may want to read that off.
Go through it, okay.
So people know what you're approving.
So that would be approved December bills pending review. Appoint Gilliam County Budget Officer Nathan Hammer. Designate voting precincts Arlington number 1, East Condon number 6, West Condon number 7. Designate county roads outside of incorporated areas of Arlington, Condon, Lone Rock as road district number 1. Designate Gilliam County Depositories, Bank of Eastern Oregon, Banner Bank, LGIP. Designate newspapers of record, Times Journal, and Eastern Oregonian. Good. Yep. And we voted, right? Yes. Did I say all those in favor? Aye. Yes. Opposed? Motion carries. Awesome. Gotta catch up here, Leslie. I was not expecting you to just do one foul swoop.
She was ready.
We moved the minutes to 5.1, unfinished business, approved December 19th meeting minutes.
I wanted to, just since, you know, we're back in court and figure out how we want to handle minutes. But there were, I found quite a few corrections, and I just wanted to know if there's a better way that we can handle the minutes going forward than what we've been doing. Because rather than me bringing them all to a meeting and having to hash it out here, I just wonder if there's another review we want before they're distributed, possibly.
I mean, I'm thinking for things like typos where we're not really changing what we're trying to capture here, that those can probably just be, we can just directly communicate with Sandy what those changes would be. So if it's typos, you know, if it's something more significant, like for instance, I noticed in here that Judge Schaefer left the meeting,
right,
but the final vote for community development coordinator request has a vote for him.
And the adjournment.
And the adjournment needs to be Mike instead of Steve. So those things, obviously, we probably want to correct.
What I guess I'm wondering is that, because see, what I was thinking might happen is that if I get, you know, if I have corrections and I get them to Sandy, and then he's going to maybe send out another revised set of minutes, and then if Sherry reviews them and she sees a couple things to do, that there might be multiple sets of minutes that are getting tossed around, and I just wondered if maybe we need a kind of thorough review before the first time they're sent out to us. And I'm not sure who the person should be, but I think it might streamline other things.
Well, even if we had a deadline for, here's the minutes, review them and get it back to me within the next 3 days, and then review them again, and make the corrections and send them out again, so we have time to do that before we get here.
So maybe send out the minutes ahead of time separate of the packet, just whenever they're ready, basically, to do an initial.
And I can send them out separately. That's easy enough. Usually we have a meeting. It takes a week for me to get for Mary to get the minutes into us, and I do my initial review and go back and forth with her, and then they go out, and that's basically time for the new packet to come back out. So I mean, I can send them out separately and do that.
I think what I'm I guess suggesting is that one of us reviews them, I guess a second review before they go out as a draft to everybody. And then maybe a lot of these things can be caught and corrected.
How do you feel about you being that?
I can do
situation?
it. I can do it. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that would be fine with me.
Yeah, I think
Let's
it's a
do
great
that.
idea. I do too. Go for it.
And then you can catch those
Yeah.
initial things and
Yeah.
Takes
Go
them
out and make
takes them
every-
out of the meeting.
Yeah.
works for me.
Okay.
So in terms of this one, do we have?
I'm thinking maybe we table it, and I can get with Mary and make some corrections, and then we'll send them out, draft form, and catch them the next time.
Okay.
That's good. Like,
Just do that?
We'll just do that. That sounds good, and that's a good way to have Commissioner Ritterall doing that, rather than having it bang back and forth and having a public meeting issue.
Got it. Okay, 6.1, board and committee assignments. We have draft committee assignments based on the feedback that each of us gave to Sandy about our county preferences. Are there any assignments on here that somebody does not, that wants to switch or swap for?
I have one.
Okay.
I am on the Columbia Ridge Landfill Citizen Advisory Committee, and I would be more than willing to let someone else take that if someone had an interest in that
I
particular
would be
committee.
happy to take that on.
Okay. So we'll move that to,
I've already drawn my arrow.
to Sherry. Any other changes? So I'm happy with mine. Okay, is there a motion?
We're happy.
There's two. Is there a motion to approve then?
I move we approve the 2019 County Court Member Committee appointments and assignments as presented and changed.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the county court member committee appointments as presented and changed, amended. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. 6.2, consider approval of IGA between County Weed Department and OPRD, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Does not look like our weed master's in, but I mean, this looks like a pretty standard agreement for a weed department to do noxious weed control at Cottonwood Canyon State Park.
I don't know, did I ever see that, or?
I don't think you did. It was a last minute submittal.
Gotcha.
Did anybody have any questions about it?
Is it just is it one we do every year?
Yeah, it's been going on since State Parks took over the Arthur Ranch down there.
Well, I would move we approve the IGA between the County Weed Department and OPRD.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the IGA between the County Weed Department and OPRD. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 6.3, consider approval of emergency services to apply for the Homeland Security grant for backup building generator. I don't see
Chris, supposed to be here.
in here. She might have thought we were gonna take a little longer. Just flipping through this. I know, you really.
Well, I've been looking forward to having a consent agenda, and when I started doing it in the city, it didn't really work quite the way it was meant to, and so I was excited just to be able to do it. And pass it. Not have to still cover each item one by one, and see what ended up.
Look at that. So the one thing, Chris will get into this, I'm sure, when she's here. The one thing, the grant amount requested is TBD in that they are trying to determine what that generator is actually going to cost. There's no match from the county, so it's basically if we get it, we get the money and we get the generator, and if we don't, then we don't. So it seemed pretty straightforward, and it's for a generator at the South Gilliam County Emergency Services Building, backup generator.
It's a pretty spending.
Yeah. Yeah, she said tens and tens of thousands of dollars.
She's coming.
Well, you're just so speedy.
You are.
You're throwing people off.
Jeez Louise, that was fast.
It's a new day, Chris.
So, these are new ones. Jeff Schott actually got somewhat of an estimate put together between the time that. Do you have one for me, Chris? Here. Do you need that?
Two separate documents, Sherry.
Oh, yeah. I see that. I can get one later if you need it.
I'll get you a copy, Mary.
Oh, it says the same thing that this says here.
Yeah, so we have the old grant submittal that I put in last week, but then this one I gave you today actually has some money in it. And Jeff's estimation was very confusing to me. The site improvements and the electrical are added together for the 48,000 down below. And the general conditions are 16 up above, plus the contractor directs the total percentages of the contractor's bid, and then total it came to 84,000 down at the bottom, and then he put in a 20% contingency of that to total that 101,000. That's how it came up on the bottom. So like you can see, it's for the emergency, the South Gilliam County Emergency Services Building. They did not put a generator in when they built the building. They supposedly, I don't know how far wired they are for it, but this is the new Homeland Security grant that's due February 8th. And so Shannon and I are wanting to put together a grant and see if we can get money to put a generator up there at that building. We're looking at the grant as backing up the fire department and emergency medical services in that building, as well as having it as a secondary DOC. So, and there is no match if we get the grant. So,
Any questions?
I don't have any.
Pretty straightforward.
Is there a motion?
I move we approve the emergency services applying for the Homestead Security grant for a backup building generator.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve for emergency services to apply for Homeland Security grant for a backup building generator. Further discussion? Hearing none, all of those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Chris.
Can I tell you something real fast while we have you captive here? I went to the North Central Public Health District meeting yesterday, and we talked quite a bit about a little bit of emergency preparedness, and they just had nothing but nice things to say about you.
thank you. Yeah, I've worked with them quite a while, and but they started the bioterrorism back in, 15 years ago. So that whole region, the Wasco, Sherman, and Gilliam all work together for North Central. Tanya Ray's great. She's a good person there. And then we also include Ricker with all that stuff. So it's a good group, and it seems like we have a lot of training capabilities through them and stuff like that. So it's a good group. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Make sure that they sign the one that has the members in it. Okay, thanks, Sandy.
All right, moving on, 6.4, Frontier Telenet Emergency Funding Turnaround Proposal and Letter to the Board. I sent you all in the packet a 2.5-page briefing, sort of the update on where Frontier Telenet is. I won't read over it, but just kind of give you the highlights, and for people in the audience, they know what was in the briefing. The sort of cut to the chase part of it is that Frontier Telenet is out of funding for a whole variety of reasons. One of the big issues is that E-rate funding, which provides, it's a federal fund that provides funding for underserved schools and libraries and is administered by USAC. That funding has been held up for quite some time over some compliance issues with their program. So we're a little unsure when or if that money will come in. So anyway, so Frontier Telenet officially ran out of money in December, and so it is in need of some emergency funds in order to be able to pay the bills and keep the system fully functioning. So I have two recommendations that I'm making for our consideration today. The first one is to provide that emergency funding. My recommendation is to provide it in the form of an emergency grant at $100,000 initially, with an additional $100,000 available upon them coming back to us with a viable turnaround plan that we can hear and feel some confidence that they're getting their house in order. There's the other counties. Sherman County approved a loan in that amount, with $100,000 with an additional $100,000. I believe they passed their loan agreements last week, and so that would come before the Frontier Telenet Board on Friday for final approval. And then my understanding is that Wheeler County is considering a loan as well this morning at their county court meeting. So the big question for us, I think, is whether we're comfortable, one, granting the money, I think, or whether we want to structure it as a loan. From my vantage point, Nathan's in the back too, so we can probably speak to the pros and cons. But my vantage point on the grant, why I'm recommending it is, one, the funds can be dispersed much more quickly. If we do a loan, we're gonna have to drop loan agreements, it's gonna have to come back before us, and the Frontier Telenet Board is gonna have to accept them, which is gonna draw out this process several weeks. But the bigger issue for me is that it is unlikely that the loan's gonna be able to be paid back. And so I think there's a reality that we just need to accept, which is that this is our responsibility to provide this service. They're in need of money to keep the system running, and from my vantage point at least, that's our responsibility to make sure that they're functioning. So
I think one of the big parts of this is that it supports our 911 system, and that's the big piece of the puzzle that we need to the reason we need to support bailing them out. But I feel very strongly about the recommendations that you made, that they go back to the AOC, recommendations of how they're going to get their house in order, and we need to see what their plan is. And I have a couple of questions. I know that they terminated some of the people that were working, Mike Smith and Rob Myers, but this estimated budget shows money for Mike Smith. Is that just as that position?
yeah, so this,
Not so much it being Mike Smith himself, but that position is still going to be needed.
yeah, this was something that Commissioner McCoy put together, I think in November. And I think he basically was operating under the assumption that there would need to be some sort of manager, and so he left a placeholder there. But the discussion that I've had with Commissioner McCoy was that he didn't necessarily intend that he was, in essence, saying that this is the individual that it has to be. And that would be obviously a decision the Frontier Telenet Board. Currently, he's not on contract.
Right.
So.
To your knowledge, was any of the AOC recommendations carried through?
I mean, I think the former Frontier Telenet Board felt like they had already done those things. There were never any written documents that I could see, and so in the discussions, if you were in their meetings when they were going over this, they sort of said check, check, check. And I think probably the way that we would see that as being completed would look a little differently than how the Frontier Telenet Board at the time thought completed looked. To me, no. I think we would be starting from the very beginning and going through this step by step and making sure that all of these things are in order. It is definitely clear that they did not have, at least on the business plan and marketing plan, they did not have that piece in order at all. So. Any other questions about this? Any concerns about grant versus loan, or things that we wanted to discuss about that?
Do you know what level Wheeler County is considering?
I spoke with Commissioner Ordway yesterday, and he did not say, but I had assumed that it would be $100,000 as well. It sounded like it was a similar thing. They were pulling it out of, or looking at pulling it out of a fund that he felt had to be repaid. And so I don't know if they will end up being able to have consensus to do that, just because of what I laid out today, that we're not sure if USAC will ever pay the E-rate funds. And even if they do, there's, because those funds are designated for providing service to the schools, it would likely only be able to pay back portions of the loan that also covered those components of the system, if that makes sense. So only the towers and components that are needed to give internet to the schools. And I'm not sure that Frontier Telenet has the financial tracking in place that it would need to assure USAC that those dollars are being tracked the way they need to be tracked to repay. So.
And it's, there's a decent chance that 2017, 2018 E-rate dollars will be available to Frontier as the years going back, those arrears that are questionable as to whether the Frontier's going to be able to see that money.
So what was that, like 236,000?
Quite a bit.
I mean, it's considerable,
36.5.
but I think, again, even if we get it, there's a question of the appropriateness of paying back loans that were intended for an entire system.
And to keep the 911 operational.
Exactly, that would cause some concerns for USAC. And that's partly why on the loan side, I also am leaning or recommended the grant, is that I also don't want us to put the Frontier Telenet board in a position where they're promising us things that they really
It's not
can't,
realistic.
it's not realistic, so.
So what we're looking for today then is the motion to,
We're looking for a motion to approve funds, and Nathan and I identified a fund to take it out of, which is the discretionary. I think that's where Sherman County actually took theirs out of as well. And so we would be looking, if we're in agreement, we'd be looking at an initial $100,000 grant coming out of the SIP discretionary fund with an additional $100,000 available pending, and this is, I think, part of the accountability that we can provide, pending our review and approval of a written turnaround plan that is presented to us. That may end up being me presenting it to us, but so that we can review that before we release the second $100,000. And we may not need to. If Wheeler County comes in with $100,000 and there are other entities, we start beating the bushes, maybe that won't become available. But I just want to be realistic with what we're looking at as a board. So,
Is there anything else we need to do as far as approving a mid-year grant of this size?
No, just make the motion to approve the grant, and then what I will do is just prepare a very simple grant language statement for signing. Right, and we could even just do the 100,000 now and deal with the other 100,000. We may have a little bit better vision of what strings might be attached to that.
okay. I'd be okay with that too.
It's your option.
Well, and by, you know, for us to say we're going to make available an additional $100,000, that would just kind of be like earmark it.
instead of just.
Not necessarily saying we're.
Not necessarily saying they have the money. Again, because it's, I would feel better making sure that we're tying that with an actual plan that comes before us than just saying. And that helps me actually as a board member of Frontier Telenet to be able to say that we really need to have this in order.
Well, I guess I would move to approve an emergency grant to Frontier Telenet from the SIP discretionary funds, in the amount of $100,000. And I think go ahead and make available another $100,000 grant, pending the court's review and approval of a written turnaround plan from Frontier Telenet.
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve an emergency grant to Frontier Telenet from the SIP discretionary fund in the amount of $100,000 and to make available an additional $100,000 grant pending the court's review and approval of a written turnaround plan by Frontier Telenet. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So the second piece of that recommended action is I think it would be helpful for us to express that desire to have a turnaround plan in a written document. So I went ahead and put together, took the liberty of guessing that you guys would be on board with that. And so I drafted one. I drafted it before Christmas and thought we would be meeting on the 7th. And so we'd need to change the date as a starting point. But for those in the audience, the letter basically is just talking about our commitment to Frontier Telenet, but then in essence saying that AOC has provided these recommendations. We would like to see Frontier Telenet move toward hiring a turnaround consultant that can put these recommendations into place so that we have a solid plan. So any thoughts, comments about the letter?
It was very well said.
I agree.
Okay. Any edits to it?
Just the date, yeah.
Just the date?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring it front and represents what we want to say.
Awesome. Well, I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the letter dated or amended to read January 9th, 2019 to the Frontier Telenet Board regarding Gilliam County's support for emergency funding and hiring an interim systems and project manager.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the letter amended as January 9th, 2019 to the Frontier Telenet Board regarding Gilliam County's support for emergency funding and hiring an interim systems and project manager. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, guys. The board will meet on Friday, so I'll plan on the next court meeting coming back with sort of what they've decided as an interim. It'll be here at the Emergency Services Building.
At what time?
10 o'clock. Yeah, as the alternate, feel free to come on.
I've already, so, or I would like to.
I can report back
Okay.
on that. I will be good about trying to keep it on the agenda and just giving updates about what they're up to so that we're not surprised again. Okay, 6.5, Employee Handbook Revision Committee. So the Employee Personnel Policy Manual was last updated in 2012. And so it needs to be updated to reflect current labor law and also to get in sync with the collective bargaining agreement. So basically, CIS has a template that is legally sound. So I think what we'll probably do to approach it is just begin with theirs and then modify it to be in alignment with our collective bargaining agreement. And I went ahead and talked to a couple of employees about their interest in being part of a committee to help make those changes. And so I've got those listed, but I'd be happy to serve. And then Ellen, because of her payroll functions and things like that, was interested. And then April Ahmet, Mike Durfee, and then Sandy would help staff us. So what I would be looking for is just, I think, a motion to appoint. Do we need to do that probably?
Sure.
A motion to appoint that committee to basically revise the handbook and then bring it back to us for final approval, probably this spring sometime.
That sounds great.
So I move to appoint Elizabeth Farrar, Ellen Wagner, April Ahmet, Mike Durfee, and Sandy McKay to the Employee Handbook Revision Committee.
I will second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we appoint Elizabeth Farrar, Ellen Wagner, April Ahmet, Mike Durfee, and Sandy McKay to the Employee Handbook Revision Committee. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. 6.6, Road Advisory Committee. Dewey's in. Do you want me to take this and you'll just answer questions? Okay. So Dewey has requested that we consider forming a road advisory committee, whose role would be basically to provide some advisory recommendations on road plan, policies, things like that, to both Dewey and to the court, in essence. Morrow County has one in place that has a structure that I think we can borrow from, what we like. And so basically, what I'm recommending is that we would, through consensus, just direct council and Dewey maybe Leslie, since you're the road commissioner, to just kind of outline what that would look like so that we can go through the process of approving a committee if we're interested in doing that. The basic kind of things that Dewey and I talked about, it would be providing advisory recommendations only, so they would not have authority, obviously, to make budget decisions or anything else. Consist of probably 5 to 7 members appointed by us, and that we would make an effort to appoint those individuals so they represent geographically the entire county, and that they're regular county road users, whether they work there, live there, you know, are using our road system regularly. So, any thoughts on, is this something we
Do you
want
have
to
anything
pursue?
to add?
No,
Does that
I
pretty
just.
much sum it up? Does that pretty much sum it up?
Yes, it does. It's more than anything, it's support. Just to make sure that the projects we're doing, the work we're doing fits the entire county. So that's.
I think there's also benefit too when you've got those committee members and they kind of know how you went about creating your plan. Then when they're in the grocery store, the post office, you know, we've got people who are out in the community that then can explain why this road was prioritized over this road. And I think it's a good idea.
I think it sounds like a good idea too.
Okay. All right.
So are we in agreement then that you three will get together and come back to us with whatever we need to do to create this?
We can do that. I think it's really good to have some citizen involvement here because of the decisions that you're making as to which roads to improve and which ones not to.
Sounds good? Okay. My hope on a timeline, Dewey and I talked about this, is if there are documents that we need to approve, that we try to have those done in the next couple of weeks and then make them available for the public for that period of time, and then maybe take this back up like the first meeting in February, maybe, if not then maybe the second. The reason is I would love to have them appointed and in place as Dewey's going into creating his work
Right.
plan
For,
for the
to
next
help
year.
me, as I have my work plan pretty well completed, my equipment replacement, stuff like that, just to run that through another body. How do we go about with the committee members? I have a list of people who are interested, but I don't know, do we need to ask if anybody else is interested? We submit a letter or whatever, and then.
Yeah, well, we'll have to officially form it first,
Okay.
and then I would think we would probably put out a notice that we're looking for folks that are interested and just go through that normal process,
Okay.
like a regular board of appointing people.
Right. Okay.
And maybe identify the geographic areas that you want.
Yeah, what your representations, whether it's geographic or if there's a certain sector, say farming.
Well, I have the farming sector, I have the freight sector, then, you know, just the users of the county roads. More than anything.
Those just need to be laid out.
Yeah.
I don't know how prescriptive we want to be, though, in the creation documents, only because if we end up having two really engaged people from the same area or that represent the same kind of user, I wouldn't necessarily want to say, well, this person can't be on it because,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's hard enough sometimes to find volunteers for committees that are engaged, so I wouldn't
In Morrow
want to
County,
keep
with
some on.
their system, the way they have it going, they only meet 2-3 times a year normally. Sometimes it's hard to get people there.
Yeah, I like your idea of building in flexibility, and then you just need to meet when you're doing the planning of what you're going to be doing
Right.
over the summer.
Well, and it would be good to get this going before budget.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I was hoping if we could
Yeah.
have it ready to approve, maybe by the first meeting in February. we could-
Okay.
That's my hope.
All right.
But I've got Morrow County's documents due, and I had those, so I will get those to you so you can see.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll just figure out when we can get together.
Sure.
Okay?
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. 6.7, strategic planning process. So, like so many other of our documents we have, the strategic plan was written in 2009. It expired in 2015 and hasn't really been revisited since. So I am looking for some direction from the court on, one, do we think it's valuable to create a new 5-year strategic plan? And if so, what the timing of that process should be?
I think it's a good tool, but it has to be used. There's so much time went into creating that. And then to just put it on the shelf and never look at it again. And what's in the current plan, that is expired, it's all working and available. Would it be easier just to take that plan and revise it and bring it up to date rather than start over?
That's one, I mean, we could do that. I think there's a question as well as whether the plan really just focus on economic development, and so that maybe there's a broader question on whether we want to look bigger than just the economic development piece. But I think also if we decided to move forward with this, my recommendation would be that we bring in a facilitator to help us through that process. And so I think the sort of nitty-gritty details of what should be in it and whether we are just revising the current one or not, I think we could probably work that out with the facilitator that we decide. Mostly I'm just saying, do we want to go through that process?
Yeah.
And if we're interested, then I think Sandy and I could work up, here's kind of what we're looking at for a process to implement this, to identify a facilitator, and kind of laying that out through the year so that we can have one in place maybe starting 2020, if we really get on it.
Well, and I agree with you, because when I first started thinking about the strategic plan, I wondered, do we have to start from scratch, or do we have to reinvent the wheel, or can we, use a lot of what work has already been done? But like you said, if we're going to expand it, then I like the idea of having a facilitator.
Someone that is familiar with that type of process.
Okay. So it sounds, if I'm hearing, that it would be helpful for Sandy and I to come back, me or Sandy to come back, and have kind of here's a suggested timeline, assuming that we would want to have this start maybe 2020 and do a 5-year plan. The idea that we'd probably be revising it or revisiting it every year, to your point about not putting it on a shelf.
Right.
And then from there, we'll just have to go step by step through the process of finding a facilitator and then scheduling those meetings and doing all of that. So mostly I just wanted to get, are you guys interested in us doing that for the court? Okay. In the interim, are we interested in doing some facilitated goal setting for this year, assuming that the strategic plan would not be up and sort of running until 2020? We kind of have this lag year. And I don't know if you guys felt that it would be beneficial for us to kind of map out what we'd like to accomplish this first year, or if you want me to just kind of steer the ship the best that I can.
I think the goal setting is a good idea.
Okay.
Just so that we each have different ideas on things we'd like to see happen. When we talked about the 100-day, our first 100-day plan, a lot of things that we talked about went beyond that, things that couldn't actually be accomplished. And so I think goal setting for this first year would be advantageous.
Okay. And it's a process that the city, like the city of Condon, goes through that every year. I've sat in on some of those, so if you're interested in seeing their process, I'm sure Catherine would be happy.
February 1st.
Yeah. And it's I found it interesting just watching how they came up with their goals and how they kind of structured it. It was not facilitated, but it might be useful if you guys are interested in sitting in and listening. So what I think I'll do for that is, it's probably a small enough expenditure, Ruben, that we could come back with like 3 options, do you think, for a facilitator?
What do you think the expenditure would be?
I mean, Catherine, when you've done them before, we've been,
We did it at very first, and we did it with League of Oregon Cities.
Okay.
And so at that point, it was actually, I think it cost us travel, which was a couple $100s.
Oh, sure. Okay, we're fine.
I looked into a facilitator this year, but the council didn't want to do it, but I didn't get to cost to him. But I mean, I would think,
I think less
if it's
than-
a one-day work session, it would probably be $1,000 to $2,000 for travel to get someone here in a day.
Yeah, we're fine then.
And AOC might actually have
Yeah, it's from
some
the
ideas of where to go out to.
Okay.
So for a standard garden variety contract, we're providing her with another 10,000.
Okay. So if we just find somebody we like to help facilitate it.
Yep.
Okay.
And AOC probably has some recommendations for what.
And I also did get one, I can send to you too. When I looked out and asked the city managers of one, there's a professor at Eastern Oregon University that sounded like he was interested in coming, so I'll send you his name.
So we do that, and then we probably just need to get it on our calendars, basically. So once we get a facilitator and some available dates, I think I'll just have Sandy email you guys, and we'll set a date and notice it, so you all can listen in if you are interested, and we'll go from there. Okay. Looking right along. 6.8, batch plant repairs and upgrades. So, in case you have not heard, we own a portable batch plant that we lease out to companies. And it's currently being leased right now by River Sand and Gravel for some work on, or subleased.
Right, so it's leased to Thompson Brothers Construction, subleased to the River Sand and Gravel, who's doing work on the windmill projects.
So there, however, it's in need of some serious upgrades to the tune of, what, $50,000 about?
Yeah, so we're looking at 35 to 40,000 to upgrade the control systems, and then another 15 to 20,000 to replace or repair the boiler system. And I'm sure if we dug into it, we could find other needed repairs.
So, Ruben and Sandy worked together to put out requests for quotes on what those repairs, actually some firm numbers on those, which are coming back, I think, later this month, right? Are they
I
already
think
in?
Sandy got it
So,
yesterday.
yeah, they closed out last night at 5 o'clock. So we've got 3, just for the control system. And so we've got 3 bids that came in that I haven't even hardly looked at yet. They just closed yesterday. But in that price range.
So the question, before we get into whether we want to upgrade it, is do we still want to own it?
Well, I think the reasoning behind why we own it in the first place is dissolved. It was purchased to help WI Construction bring their company in and set up, and they no longer are using it. I personally don't think the county needs to own the batch plant. I had a discussion with Dewey to see where he was stood on the subject, and he agrees, if you don't mind my saying so, that I would rather see us put it up for sale and get out of the business entirely than to put money into something that is going to sit idle.
That's going all right. Leslie, did you, what are you thinking?
I'm still thinking.
And so just, was it yesterday and the day before, we also got an email from Peter Mitchell at the Port of Arlington saying that he had been approached by a company that might be interested in purchasing it. And then we also, the port meeting last night, spoke to the port and kind of put in their ear, would it be something that they might want to take on so they could potentially remain in the county as opposed to just being sold and go away.
And it does have a certain degree of usefulness, just even being there. For example, if someone is bidding on a construction project, they have to consider that it's there instead of building into their bid, trucking in cement from the Dalles or Good River or Hermiston or whatnot, or bringing in their own batch plant to do it. So it does, just the fact that it's there has some value to you. also when you have projects like this Montag project, it's very good. It's helping them put the Montag project in at a better price.
Are they actually using it? I thought it
Hood
didn't
Rivers
work.
will-
No, they're using it.
They brought Hood River Sand and Gravel who subleased it. They did bring in a backup. They have a smaller backup that is more mobile, and they brought it up, but they're using it. And it's the guy that's operating it, Hood River Sand and Gravel, was Trevor Zorza. He knows these things. I had some conversations with him. He said they were able to get it working, what they need to do. They're just a little worried about it. And that's why they brought in the extra one. And his recommendation was to upgrade it, whether he needs to run it or not. He did say that one of the issues with why it needs an upgrade is because it's not good for them to just sit. So that's another consideration. We don't know what the next project is going to be and how long it's going to be sitting. And so that's the other side.
How long is the lease with Johnson?
I believe it runs through April right now.
What did the port, what was their response to?
They needed more information, I
They
think.
wanted to think about it, I think. I don't know if Dewey has, or
We were
Peter's
Peter's
waiting,
here too.
we were waiting to hear what the board decided today.
Yeah, it was the first time they
Yeah.
had been approached with it.
Mhm. We just kind of said, oh, this is going to be coming up before the court. If we should decide that Gilliam County doesn't want to own it, would the court have an interest in owning it? I mean, I'm kind of with you, Sherry. I don't know that Gilliam County needs to own a batch plant. So, is there information that would be helpful for you to have, Leslie?
I just feel like I haven't talked to very many people about it, and I think I'm just switching gears because we've been talking about it for a while, and that we wanted to keep it, and so, now it's just
It's a total turn.
yeah.
It's a new day.
That's right.
Well, the lease is through April, so we can't do anything until the lease expires anyway. Correct?
Well, I mean, unless we want to break the lease, yeah.
So in
I
terms
guess
of
there's
selling
that
it
to
or not,
consider.
but
It's being used now, so.
Yeah.
It's not sitting idle anyway.
the issue, I think, would be if we're intending after the lease is up to sell it, then we probably then would not make those expenditures to upgrade
Right.
it, is really
Exactly.
what we're after here is.
I guess I would be okay with holding off on any expenditures, but I'm still just going to mull it over a little bit about whether or not we want to be in the batch plant business. Unless you guys are going to
No.
decide.
Okay, I'd like you to be on board.
Okay.
I told you I was gonna do that.
I was ready.
Okay, so we will, how long do you want to mull it over?
Next meeting.
Okay, we'll put it back on the agenda for next meeting then, and make a final decision on whether to keep it
Okay.
and go from there. Okay. It's on the paper here. 6.9, county court meeting efficiency. This is my special little agenda item. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our meeting schedule and the possibility of all three of us having some office hours, if you guys are interested in that. And so what I was thinking was if we're open to maybe moving our meetings, if we're able to keep my 2-hour goal of meeting time, if we would consider maybe moving our regular meetings to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which would then allow, if you guys are interested in being in the building on Wednesday mornings, I know staff would probably appreciate that. If you have questions on things that are coming up, before us that afternoon would have an opportunity to check in with folks that we need to have conversations with. Is there an interest in doing that, or we really want to stay with 10 o'clock?
I'm okay with trying.
Yeah, I think it's a
1
great
p.m.
idea. I intended to come earlier going forward and, spending some time.
Okay.
I'm used to going to work at 6 a.m., so 10 o'clock's, the day's half over by the time 10 o'clock rolls around for me, so.
And then in terms of office hours, the small conference room, of course, is always available if you want to just work out of there, but I also spoke with Judge Patnode about her office, and she said, you guys are welcome to use it. The sheriff's office has a key to it, so you would just need to check in with Chris or Gary or whoever and get the key, and she said that was fine. So if you need a more private place to meet or just want to work someplace out of the way that's a little bit more quiet, then that would be available too.
I'd also like to establish office hours in Arlington every other Wednesday,
Okay,
the second and fourth Wednesdays.
okay.
I did meet with Nancy Proctor, and we talked, I got another tour of the Gronquist building and what's available there. I can work from home, but my mother lives with me, and I prefer that people don't come to my house.
Mhm.
That's worked out very well.
Yeah.
So I'd like to have us think about that as well.
Look into a space at the Gronquist
Yes.
building. Okay. So then, your intention, Sherry and Leslie too, do you want us to publicize that you're here in the mornings on those Wednesdays? Just have people contact you directly if they want to
I
meet
would rather,
with you?
I'm still deciding what I'm going to do
Want to do,
as far as
okay.
that goes. So I would just want people to contact me
Okay.
directly. If somebody wants to meet with me, just like now, if anybody wants to meet with me at any time,
They'll just call you
they
directly.
can get a hold of me.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna think about,
How you want to structure yours?
yes.
I got that.
Work for me.
Awesome. Same with you, Sherry?
Yeah.
Just want people to contact you
Yeah, that'd be
directly. Okay. Okay, agenda and briefings format feedback. So we have a new agenda format. Sounds like the consent agenda is already hit with Leslie. Are you guys okay with the way that we're structuring this? Is there anything that we're missing, or did this feel like kind of a natural flow?
It seems to be working pretty well.
Well, really well.
Okay, so keep it.
Yeah.
And then the briefings format, obviously most of these things came from me, but I would anticipate that in the future, if staff's coming before us, that we would ask them to use a similar format, so it's pretty standardized and we can see exactly what the expectation or ask is from people coming before us. Was this helpful?
It was great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, really
Yes.
well.
Are there changes or bits of information that aren't on here that we should be adding?
Not that I've seen yet.
Because I tried to do, like an actual recommendation, so we knew what we were walking into. If there was a potential motion, just giving some language, because I know sitting up here, for people in the audience, you sit up here and your mind goes blank sometimes when you're trying to make a motion, so having a little cheat sheet kind of is helpful.
Very, very helpful.
Okay, so I'll just share that template with staff as well. And when folks are scheduling with us, probably within the courthouse family or within the county family, we'd use that, and then we'll figure out what we want to do with the public that's coming before us. But at least kind of standardize this from staff requests that are coming in.
Sounds good.
Cool. The last piece of this I wanted to ask you about was scheduling of new agenda items. Kind of historically, people ask to come before us, and we generally let them do that. My sense is that there is a pretty significant backlog of work. From everything from employee handbooks that haven't been revised for 6 years to strategic plans and things like that. And so I guess what I'm maybe asking or looking for your feedback on is your comfort level in me kind of deciding what's most appropriate to come before us and when. And particularly with funding requests that are coming in that are kind of outside of the main budgeting time and things like that, we tend to get a lot of people with good ideas that come before that are probably worth our time, but may need to be heard at certain times that make more sense for us to hear them. Where it's a little bit more organized and we can compare project to project rather than having them come up randomly during the year, those kinds of things. So I'm just asking if you guys feel comfortable with me kind of making those judgment calls on here's how we structure this. And especially after we do our goal setting, I think that will help too for me to be able to say, no, this needs to wait. We really need to focus on this.
I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Well, then I will continue doing that. Fantastic.
You're a leader, lead us.
Okay. Will do. 6.10, scheduling a tour of the SWCD building. So I was over there in December and they asked, Herb asked if we would be interested in seeing the building and maybe doing a little presentation on just what SWCD's been up to. They receive funding, some funding from the county, and just kind of talking about what that leverages, what that buys us kind of thing. I think if we did that, I'm not sure, we'd probably have to notice it as, would it be like noticed as a work session?
That would be a good idea. I mean,
Okay.
it doesn't sound like you're
Or
going
is
to
it,
be
or
deliberating.
is it information gathering?
It technically is, and it's not like you're going to be deliberating towards a decision, so it wouldn't fall into the technical public meeting, but when in doubt, hurt,
Yeah.
try to notice it and let people know what they're doing and what you're doing and all that. Okay.
Okay. So I think what we do then is I will go back to Herb and see if he's got some dates in mind, and then I'll just have Sandy organize all of our calendars and see what dates work best. But I'm thinking maybe if we're doing 1 o'clock afternoons, that we might just do one of those Wednesdays and do the morning, and just make it a quick, maybe 90 minutes or so. I'll see what he's thinking in terms of timing. I wanted to make sure that that was an interest. Okay. We will get that scheduled and noticed. The next one, scheduling an annual road tour. This is something I'm really interested in, actually, going with Dewey around and seeing both the north end and the south end. And so part of my question, I think, to Ruben is is there a way for the three of us to be able to conduct a road tour that is still the public can still come with us? What would that look like? How would we structure
For the
that?
building, it would be kind of tough to have the public coming along. That is a problem. Now, similar to the building, it is information gathering, and if you're not deliberating towards a decision on any matter, it technically isn't a public meeting, but this is also more than a social gathering. So you're really in that gray area.
I think last time we invited Mac to go along with us.
The road tours are great. I've gone on several.
If we did like a bus where the public could come along?
Oh, then no problem.
Okay.
Then you notice it as a public meeting.
Maybe some of those potential people that are going to, that are interested in the committee.
And the committee could come
Should
too?
come.
Okay, so it sounds like we would just notice it and then get public transportation a bigger,
If you're willing to do that, otherwise I would want to take a look at a few things and give this some more consideration rather than just shooting from the hip answer on it.
Okay.
It's, there are some people in this county that complain about those sorts of things. And I don't want to cause an issue with something like this.
I'll say bless the sea.
Definitely invite love.
Because I do think it would be beneficial and probably the best use of Dewey's time to not have to take us each individually.
Sure.
If there's an interest in all three of us going.
Well, and why not just make it a public meeting so you can discuss things?
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough for everyone just to sit there with a lunch pail in their hand and not actually discuss what they're seeing around them. So, why not?
The person that you're talking about is actually interested in being on the road committee.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Nice.
So,
So we're gonna volunteer. We've got to volunteer. Okay, so I think maybe for that, maybe you and I, Ruben, can just kind of touch base if there's any concerns on how we would notice it. Can you, in order to ensure we have a large enough bus for public meetings like that, can you ask the public to express an interest in being on the bus?
We'll
how
request
do
it. We won't necessarily require it
Okay.
as a strict rule, but we'll request that people RSVP.
RSVP, okay.
And say that we can't guarantee you'll have a spot.
If you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll circle back with you and make sure that we're good with that, and then
Well, we notice that you do that.
we're fine, okay.
It's having you guys go on your own.
Okay. I mean, we're making it a public meeting and letting people tag along.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, maybe.
All right, well, Dewey will coordinate with you and Sandy and make sure we find a good time for everybody's schedule, but probably we'll do maybe one of our, I'm thinking if we do one of our meetings where we're up in the north end, then maybe that morning we'll do the north end roads, and then, because it'd actually be two separate public meetings, the south end and the north end. And then before one of our Condon meetings we'll do in the morning probably. Same kind of things, we're not asking.
Or, you know, the other thing too is that we do kind of have our Wednesdays.
Every Wednesday.
So we have also do it on an alternate Wednesday.
Okay, sounds good. We'll coordinate a schedule and
So we can get going on this. What would your preference be on the alternating Wednesdays?
My preference, I guess, would be an alternate Wednesday.
So that we have plenty of time.
Okay.
we can do that.
Do we run
It's
off the
it's
road or
hard,
something?
it's really hard to do a good tour of either end in a couple hours.
How many hours do you need, do you think?
It just all depends on how far, how in depth you want to go.
Okay,
And
probably
look at
have to take
stuff
our
and-
lunch box.
Huh?
We'll probably have to take
Pack
our
a
lunch
lunch
box.
That can be worked out too.
Okay, we'll find a good time and we'll notice. So the
After
public,
the snow
come
is
one,
off.
come all. You
Yeah,
guys can all
exactly.
tour our
And the
roads.
fog lifts.
Day.
Okay, 7.0 court member reports. Leslie, you're the dean. You got anything to report?
Yes. Gotta find my papers. Okay, yesterday I went to a North Central Public Health District meeting. I got presents.
Oh.
Boy, isn't that nice?
Nice little emergency preparedness calendar
Wow.
that they gave us, and it was good. Tanya, the one that Chris mentioned earlier, she presented a lot of times in the meetings we have somebody come present a little bit about what they do or project that they're working on, and she came in and did a presentation. It was called Do One Thing, and you'll notice in your little calendars that every month they tell you something that you can do. So over the course of the year, it's not overwhelming, just over the course of the year, every month you do a different task to try to become more prepared for emergencies. And I think the first one is like, try to find out what disasters actually occur in your area. That's a good thing to start with. Anyway, it was very interesting. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is they used to say, you'll notice I think on the second month, is it says something about you need to have on hand 3 days of water for your family. Well, that's, I guess, outdated. It's 2 weeks. They recommend having enough water to last for 2 weeks.
So I lived in Puerto Rico 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. What else did you talk about? Measles, there's been a measles case in the gorge, and now they're just waiting. I think they have to wait till the 21st of the month to kind of wait to see if anything else pops up. But they, they did all the press releases and things to notify people about that. They also mentioned that the Center of Living is working on a new building, so there's going to free up some office space in the Public Health District building. So they may be able to branch out a little bit and not quite have as many people in an office as they currently have. One last thing, they said they were trying to get money from the CCOs to go from 3 days a week to 5 days a week in their walk-in clinic. So I thought that was very exciting too. The only other things that I have are a couple. Scott Hagee was at the meeting and he said he's going to come provide information for us. Wasco County, I guess, is going to take over building codes.
Okay.
So.
Gave me a little tip about that, and I thought, yeah, excellent. Coming up, I have a BOPTA training next week, and also I'm going to the governor's inaugural gala next week.
Exciting. What are you
Yes.
wearing? No.
Well, I have
Is it a formal dress? What are we doing?
We'll be at Ken's College.
It's on the agenda, actually. at
Is
Kent
it?
College. If you want to go, they're doing transportation.
Yay.
Do it.
I'm going too.
I was wondering.
I don't have anything to wear.
Macy's comes very quickly. Online shopping too, right?
Yes,
now.
it does.
Important stuff.
And that's all I have.
That would be my issue too. I do have something to report.
Okay.
I did meet with Nancy Proctor, and I did get a little review of the Gronquist building and some of the prospects for what might be coming in, and talked about the possibility of the court using it for our meetings, which are held in the north end of the county, as well as office space. So that's pending. And I also contacted Nan Lawrence with Ardent Mills at the industrial park, and I'm meeting with her and her boss Scott next Tuesday at 2:30 and get a tour of their facility and find out what's going on with that building and what we need to do with that. And I would like to propose that the, damn, I hate because we were talking about birthdays. February 6th, is that the right date? Meeting
It's a Wednesday?
is that
Yep.
was the problem this morning.
That's right.
Be held in Arlington.
Okay.
Due to the fact that I do not have a caretaker for my mother, and I cannot be this far away from her.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. So we'll make the 6th meeting. Okay.
And that is it.
Fantastic. I just have two quick things. Ellen and I had a discussion about whether we would have an interest in pursuing making the commissioner positions nonpartisan. And if we do have an interest in doing that, it's something that we would probably want to act on fairly quickly. The reason being, we would need to, there's a primary ballot this year and a November ballot. We don't have anything on the November ballot right now, which means if this would be the only thing, we would end up having to pay for that election. So if we are interested in pursuing making the commissioner seats nonpartisan, it would be more cost effective to try to get it done in time for it to be, it has to be submitted early March. So if you're interested in that and you want to make that a priority, then Ruben and I can put it on the agenda basically to walk us through the steps to do that.
I believe that was in my 100-day plan.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't see anything about this position that has anything to do with partisanship, and so.
Okay.
Well, and I think there were, from what I heard, there were a lot of people that,
Non-affiliated voters.
yes, and that, you know,
That
are
didn't
upset that they can't, you know, they don't
vote
see
on
their,
the commissioners.
they don't see the person they want to vote for, and so I don't see any reason for it to be either.
We need to dig in a little bit into the process, but based on what the other counties were doing, it sounds like there would be public hearings associated with that. So those would probably be coming up in February in order to be able to have that ready for the March ballot, which is why I decided to just raise it today to make sure that.
So what do we need to do to make that happen?
Well, I'm not sure at this point,
Okay.
because in meeting with Judge Farrar, we wanted to get your input first before looking into what the timeline is. And typically with the ballot measure, you do a resolution, you decide what question you're going to put on the ballot, and then you put it on. I don't think it's going to get differ very much from that, but this is something that's controlled by statute. It doesn't happen all that often.
Weaver County did it in 2018.
Okay.
Okay. And the other thing, okay. The other thing is just to let you know about juvenile court cases and sort of how we've handled them. There were 4 pending cases when I took office. One was a juvenile delinquency, so that's, you know, your juvenile individual. And then 3 were dependency cases. So those are custody, things like that. And they had hearings that were coming up almost immediately. And so I spoke with Marion and also with Amy and came up with a plan for how to deal with those. In essence, those 4, I went ahead and signed court orders to send just those 4 over to the circuit court. So new ones that come in will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis until I am trained and until the court has an opportunity to talk about if we want to make changes to that function long-term. So that's just kind of an update if you're wondering what's happening with the juvenile cases and am I hearing those or what? I signed those court orders so that they can be heard and folks aren't waiting around to be in front of the judge. And that's all I've got for court reports. Anything else under that? Okay. Any announcements?
Got Frontier Telnet Friday, Tri-County Court on the 23rd in Fossil.
And then the next piece for us is next meeting. I would like for us, in order for this to be able to function as efficiently as it's functioned, I need time to prepare briefing materials and have it structured in a way that you guys know what we're considering, things like that. So I would request that we do it the afternoon of the 23rd and just tell Tri-County that we're leaving at noon, basically. It's in Fossil, so we could come back and grab a quick bite to eat and then start at 1.
I was hoping for the 23rd as
Okay.
well. The only thing that I found out though yesterday that Walton is going to be in Arlington the afternoon of the 23rd at 2:30. So I thought, well, but county court is going to have to probably prevail over.
Well, if we do a 45-minute.
Well, the other thing I thought too is
45-minute.
maybe we could meet in Arlington and then we would be there, but I don't know if that's too much.
It's more of a challenge for us to get from Tri-County Court because it's in Fossil and be there on time.
Okay. But just keep that in mind, he is going to be there at 2:30 on Wednesday too, so if we're really good.
Let's be efficient, is what you're saying, I think. Okay. So we will meet, the next regular meeting will be January 23rd at 1 p.m. then.
That sounds great.
Okay. Any other to come before us? If not, then I'll adjourn the meeting. 11:18.